Good evening, everybody. It's been a while, so this is Vivek here today, and it's my second season of the Thrifty Marketer Talks. Earlier, it was called the SMB Talks, and I've been planning it for a while, but due to some other commitments and my health issues, I couldn't start the season earlier. So, season two, I changed the name. Obviously, it was the SMB Talks. You have met a lot of amazing people last year. I started the show during the COVID pandemic, and we met a lot of people, interesting people coming in and having a lot of amazing conversations. So that is the plan continues to be the same this year also. We are going to meet. I have a long list of amazing folks from all over the globe who have registered their interest to share their story on this amazing show, and I am looking forward to meet all of them. So I'm so happy to be here, even though I'm a bit rusty with StreamYard functionalities and all that. So I might do something wrong. So I'm asking for forgiveness in advance. So today I have a fantastic guest to kick off the first episode of season two. So today we're going to talk about personal branding. So personal branding is one of those buzzwords. We are all hearing it every day. A lot of gurus, a lot of experts around talking about it, etc., etc. So it's very very difficult for a newbie or an amateur to start their journey of personal branding. So I wanted to start off the season two with some impactful presenter coming in and talking on an impactful topic. So what better than personal branding? So today I have Marina Byezhanova. She's an entrepreneur, global speaker, and a university instructor. She's a co-founder of a personal branding agency called Brand of a Leader. She has been quoted and references in a lot of publications, very prestigious ones like Inc.com, Forbes.com, Fast Company, Success Magazine, Wall Street Journal, and the Financial Post. She has spoken to audiences of entrepreneurs and business executives across Europe, Asia, North America, and Middle East. She is a tenured member of Entrepreneurs Organization and having served in local, regional, and global leadership roles. Her mission is to inspire entrepreneurs to speak up, stand out, and to be radically authentic through the power of building their personal brands. So without further ado, let me bring her on.
Hi, Vivek.
Hi, Marina. Thank you so much for taking your time out and joining today.
Thank you for having me. I'm doing great. I love that you said good evening when you joined. It's 10 a.m. where I am in Montreal, Canada. So it's fun to be in completely different time zones.
Absolutely. That's the beauty of technology, right? We are in different zones. We are talking like as if we are sitting across a coffee table or something. Right. First of all, thank you so much for joining today. And this is my season two, as you might have heard my intro of you, and I have had a lot of people who themselves have strong personal brands come on the show last season. So I'm so glad that we are starting off this season with you here and talking about personal branding. So, just to give a brief intro about the show. So what we do is we get on guests who are expert in their own field, or individuals who have an interesting story to tell. And we curate a set of questions for them related to the topic. And I'll shoot these questions to you if you're ready, one by one, and you can take it up as and when it comes. Are you ready for it?
Very, very ready. And I love the premise of the show too. Thrifty Marketer, it applies to, of course, marketers, but to anybody, because we're all marketing ourselves in one way or another. Personal branding is just one of those tools that allows us to do that, but it really is relevant to everyone. We're all selling and marketing something.
Absolutely. We all are selling something, right? Everybody is selling something, and personal brand obviously helps with a lot of things. So let's hear it from. So shall we start?
Let's do it.
All right. So my first question, it's a very basic question about personal brand. It's a buzzword for last few years. A lot of people are talking about it. A lot of cluttered noise is there. So there is so much confusion about it as well. So I wanted to get an expert like you to clear it for once and for all. What is a personal brand, and why is it important all of a sudden for everybody to focus on building a personal brand?
Huge buzzword, huge buzz concept for a couple of reasons. Of course, the rise of social media, reality television, and a lot of people going viral on social media and all of a sudden calling themselves personal branding experts and conflating marketing and branding. But huge buzz around the 200% increase in the search of the term personal branding. If you look at Google Trends in the last 5 years, huge increase in the amount of research that we're seeing on the topic as well. So academic research also in the last half of a decade. So huge.
Wow.
Tons of misconceptions that are created when we talk about personal branding, which makes it either unappealing to people and feels kind of cheesy or feels inaccessible. And so I'm glad that we're speaking about this. We're going to be dispelling some of the myths. To make it really simple, personal brand is the recognizability of your name. And that's predicated on a unique differentiator or an angle. Unique differentiator can feel intimidating to many people. A lot of people say,
Right.
I don't have anything unique. So an angle, choose an angle, and we're going to be speaking about that. And then clear association that your name evokes in people's minds consistently. That's a brand. And because it's your name, that's a personal brand.
Right, right. I've never heard somebody put it like that before because it's always standard definitions. Whenever I ask an expert what is a personal brand, it's a standard definition which I can Google and get myself. But that's a unique take on that. Thank you so much for that. All right. So let's make it this a very open conversation, right? For example, a lot of people struggle with building a personal brand. Most of my, when I speak to my team members, I talk to my colleagues, my friends, entrepreneur friends, etc. When I say the word personal brand, most of them some of them are cringing, some of them are become very uncomfortable. They start scratching their head. They think there are a lot of misconceptions around it. I need to create a lot of content and things like that. So let's start with, what are some of the salient benefits of building a personal brand? Why should somebody invest time and energy into building a personal brand?
The definition that I propose, I like it because it makes it very simple and more accessible, and it answers a lot of those questions in a more logical way. So if we're looking at personal branding as the process of creating recognizability of our name, well, if our name is more recognized among the audience that's relevant to us, what does it give us? Opportunity, right? So if for example, I'm an entrepreneur, I want my name to be recognized so that I get opportunities for my business. I can attract employees. I can retain staff because, there's recognizability in my name. So opportunity that's relevant to me, maybe board seats, right? Depends on what those opportunities are. For somebody who's an employed professional, instead of constantly, every time you're looking for a new job, every time you're looking for a new opportunity, internal mobility, you're looking to be promoted, instead of constantly having to sell yourself, which is very uncomfortable to most of us, and knocking on doors and feeling like you're a beggar and applying and emailing and messaging, that's all selling. That's not marketing. When you're building recognizability of your name and people know what it is that your name's associated with, opportunity comes to you instead of you chasing opportunity. And that's really in business also difference between sales and marketing. Sales, you're knocking on doors. Marketing, you're building something and then you're attracting the opportunity that you're looking to attract.
Right. I got that. So the first point which you mentioned, that kind of leans into my next question. You said, leaders having a personal brand, people will be more, at sticking to you. If I don't know whether that's the right word to use, but if a leader has got a strong personal brand, it comes with a certain amount of likability, right? Like for example, the best example which I can think of is Sir Richard Branson, right? He's I don't think any Virgin employee will hate him because his personal brand is so strong and his persona reflects like his personal brand. So obviously that helps a lot. So my next question is connected to that. Is it critical for leaders of organizations today to have a strong personal brand today? If yes, what kind of impact does it have on the brand or the company they are leading?
Well, look, there's a lot of studies that are coming out on the topic. One of them that says that 47% of a company's reputation is influenced by the reputation of the CEO. We also know that 80% of people don't quit companies, they quit their boss, right? Anybody who's watching this right now, think about quitting your last few jobs? Was it the company or was it the manager, right? Very often it's the manager.
Right.
So people quit the boss. It stands to reason to say that people would also be attracted to the company depending on leadership. We also know that increasingly, especially with younger generations, people are looking to work for mission-driven companies. They're looking for a fit with their own values, an organization that has the same values. Well, it's really hard to communicate organizational values because people are a little bit skeptical, right? Of course, as a company from your corporate accounts, you're going to say this, this, and that. But when you're able to get to know the leaders of this company and see what they stand for, what they talk about, what they embody, it humanizes the organization and builds a bigger connection there. So it absolutely helps. There's still a lot of research to be done to make a direct connection between a, let's say, CEO brand or leaders brand and connect it to the employer brand. Still a lot of research to be done. It's one of my research projects right now, but definitely all of the signs are pointing in that direction. And by the way, something that you mentioned, you said, Richard Branson saying, likely his employees wouldn't hate him, right? He has a very likable personal brand. Thing is, it's okay to have a polarizing personal brand that's not as likable, right? Donald Trump has a huge personal brand rooted in authenticity. You can like him, you can hate him very passionately, but it's a brand rooted in authenticity. So it attracts, it also detracts, and that's fine as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Today's world is anyways about any publicity is good publicity. So
depends on your goals, right? And as long as it's authentic.
Exactly. I completely agree with you. Right. So moving on, my next question is, personal brand, it's always needs to be built on some basic pillars. There are something you rely on to build your personal brand. So what are some of the key characteristics of a powerful personal brand?
Okay, so very simple, very simple, very practical, very tangible to make sure it's less cringy and overwhelming. So number one, you have to choose an angle. That's what's going to help. There has to be some kind of an angle. Now, what makes an angle, right? What can be your angle? You don't have to overthink it. It doesn't have to be some groundbreaking, concept that you developed and created. If you did, that helps, that's fantastic, but if you didn't, it's okay. It can be something, a word, an adjective, a short phrase that really, truly represents who you are, what you stand for, what you believe. I'll give you examples. You think of Brené Brown, it's courage and vulnerability, right? Now, she didn't come up with those words, didn't come up with those concepts, but it's those clear associations that she evokes in people's minds because her angle is so clear. You think of Gary Vaynerchuk. Again, like him or loathe him, but hustle, right? You think of him, think of hustle. So you want to think of what it is that represents you. How do you think about that? It's a process of introspection. There are a few things you can do. One thing that you can do is you can do this exercise that we do with our clients when we help them develop their personal or uncover their personal brand, is an exercise that's called the lifeline. You take a big sheet of paper, you put a line in the middle, and you map out your whole life from as early as you remember, personal, professional, everything. You map out the most significant moments, the highs and the lows. And then, and don't just limit it to the obvious, births, deaths, tragedies. No, just anything. It was significant because, this happened to me or that happened to me. And then you look for common denominators and patterns. And that can be indicative of something that keeps surfacing for you that really is important to you, matters to you. You can look at your core values. What are those really, really strong beliefs that you hold so, deeply that really shape and represent who you are? You can build, that can be your angle, a strong core value, core belief. Or it can be, as I gave you examples, adjectives, could be something about your standout personality. You commit, you choose one, you stick to it. That's pillar number one. Pillar number two is associations. Vivek, people will always often say, everybody has a personal brand. Whether or not you want the personal brand, you have a personal brand, so you want to manage it, properly and be in control of it. That is not true. That is a myth. Everybody has a reputation, not everybody has a brand. What makes a brand, in addition to a clear angle, is consistent associations, right? So everybody, they see my name, what are they associating me with? How would they all uniformly describe me? What adjectives, what nouns come to mind uniformly and consistently? That makes a brand a brand.
Right. Absolutely. I completely agree with you. Just to refresh everybody's memory, Marina here runs a personal brand agency. I just mentioned, so you will hear about the amazing work they do at the end of the show. We have some questions for that as well. And also Gary Vaynerchuk is big influence on my personal life itself, because he is somebody who has pulled me out of a lot of troubles, situations and troubled times, based on his content and his messages. So thanks for bringing him up as well. All right. So moving on, let's get to a little bit practical stuff, right? For example, so by now people will be clear about, okay, I want to build a personal brand. Okay, these are the reasons Marina already told me, so I'm going to do it. So now the question is, if somebody, once they decide to invest in their personal brand, what are some of the baby steps do you recommend to them?
So the process of building a personal brand is very clear, and it needs to start with figuring things out and working on your strategy before you're starting to execute. The biggest mistake that people make is they start executing and then it's cringy and then it doesn't work, and then you start questioning yourself and it's not really working, and why am I doing this? And then it falls apart. So the first piece is deep introspection. You sit down and you really think of, what is it that I stand for? What is my angle? How do I want to be perceived? Who are the people that are relevant to me? What are the things that I want to be talking about? And then how do I not want to be perceived? What are the people that are irrelevant to me? What are the things that for sure I'm not going to be talking about? So all that. The first thing that you do before you do anything is you sit down, you go through introspection, you figure out all those pieces. That will serve as the roadmap, so that when you start executing, every time you start questioning yourself, doubting, not sure, you have something to refer to, so you're not figuring it out every time you're about to start taking action on your personal brand building and your visibility building. You have something that can guide you. That becomes really important. That's really the first step.
Right. All right. So, now since you have worked with so many leaders across the globe, helping them, guiding them on building their personal brand, etc. What are your top 3 advice, for leaders who want to build an authentic, powerful personal brand?
Number 1, realize that you are your own worst critic, and you are your own biggest bottleneck. Vivek, it is incredible. The people that we work with are widely inspiring. We work with very successful business owners from across the globe, as you said. I will be speaking with incredibly inspiring people with the most fascinating story, with crazy accomplishments. And they say, personal branding, people have been telling me to pay attention to it. I see benefits, but I don't have anything to say. Who wants to listen to me? What do I have of value? And I look at them and I go, if you have those doubts, then there's no hope for any of us. And the thing is, it's just a very shared sentiment. So number 1 is accept that you absolutely have something of value to say. And with first of all, there's intrinsic benefits to you, right? You put yourself out there, you create visibility, you attract opportunity, but you're also able to influence and impact others. So that becomes really, really huge as well. So number 1, what was your question?
Top 3 advice for leaders.
Top 3 pieces of advice. That's number 1. Number 2 would be figure out strategy before execution, because as I said, that is the biggest mistake that people make. And then number 3, trust the process. So either you're executing on it yourself, so you looked at strategy, you built out your plan of action, do not revisit it every week and every 2 weeks. Just stick to it, because personal brand building is all about longevity and building those associations with longevity in mind. You mentioned that you launched your show during COVID and it was going phenomenal, and then you stopped. Yep. And I bet you started overthinking something. Oh, I already had all these amazing people. Who can I invite now? Who's going to continue listening to it? I went through the same thing. So absolutely relate. I'm talking from experience. So what wins the game is consistency. So if you're doing it yourself, trust the process that you created, revisit it once a year, not every second week. And if you're engaging people, if you're working with, let's say, ghostwriters, or you're working with a social media team, whoever you're working with, trust them, let them do their work, and don't be a bottleneck in the process for them either.
Got it. Yeah. I believe what you mentioned first, imposter syndrome is one of the biggest, curses for every creator out there. Everybody thinks, why will people listen to me? Who am I to talk about this and all these things? We all go through that. I totally agree with you. And you losing that train of thought. I have observed this with a lot of experts. People who are very passionate about a subject, when they start talking about the subject, they lose track of it. They have gone so deep, they forget about what was the question all about. I've seen it happen multiple times. Right. Interesting. So, so now since you have said the three advices for the leaders, I always believe that if I want to learn something, all right, like the show which I'm doing right now, I'm not a very confident person to do a show like this. But then my premise of doing something which I don't know is I start emulating people who are already doing. Like I mentioned, Gary Vaynerchuk is a role model for me because I look at his videos. I try to learn something from his mannerisms, body language, and things like that. Sometimes I use, I drop f bombs like he does also sometimes. With my personal team, etc., etc. But the best way to learn something, to do something, is by emulating role models who have already accomplished the same. So, can you name some personal brands that can be the best role models for the leaders who want to build personal brands today?
No. And you know why not? Because I believe that this is unique to every single person. So
Absolutely.
the strategy that you mentioned of looking at influencers, people you find influential, let's not say influencers, that word sometimes throws people off as well. People that you find influential, people that you respect, and then emulating what they're doing is a fantastic strategy. But it has to be, you have to choose people that feel right to you, right? We have so many people that come to us that say, I will only do this if you guarantee I do not sound anything like Gary Vaynerchuk. And I'm a huge fan of his, but people say that and that's valid, because if that's not your style of influence and it doesn't work for you, there's no point in emulating it. You're not going to sound authentic. It doesn't speak to you for a reason, so no reason to emulate. So this is though one of the exercises we do with our clients. We ask them to build a list of people who they find to be influential that they like. And those could be, public figures, could be politicians, could be people online, could be whoever, authors, doesn't matter. And then we ask, what is it that you like about their style of influencing? And then some people will say, well, I like that this person's very calm, very poised, very quiet. Some people will say, oh, I love the energy and I love the, and I really like that. And that becomes indicative. So this is the exercise for all of you to do, is identify who those people are to you. What are the common denominator? What is it that you like about them? Dig a bit deeper and then emulate that. And that becomes quite unique for every single person.
Wow, that's a fantastic insight, actually. Never heard about it like that, or I've never thought about it as well. Right. All right. So when I was doing a little bit research on you and your work, I came across a term called portability. I've never heard about it from a personal brand standpoint, obviously. So I want to hear it from you. You speak a lot about portability when it comes to personal brand. So can you share some insights on that? What does it even mean, for a common man?
Portability is fascinating, and it's something that we stumbled upon by accident. So my personal branding agency, Brand of a Leader, as I told you, we work with entrepreneurs from across the globe, and we also do quite a bit of research. That is one of our points of differentiation. We really dig deep into what personal branding is and all the different facets. So a year and a half ago, we conducted a study. We were interviewing Gen X entrepreneurs, predominantly from North America, asking them why they were building a personal brand. So we focused specifically on people who had already been doing it. And we received a few answers, and one of them really surprised us, and it was the concept of portability. And then we started digging deeper into that, and it made total sense. So what is portability? Portability is the idea that because your name has recognizability, right? That's your personal brand. There's equity in that. There's value in that. So what does that mean? None of our journeys in life are on a linear path, right? Whether you're an entrepreneur or you have a job, you are likely not always doing the same thing at the same place throughout your whole life. This is just not what we do anymore, right? If you're an entrepreneur, you have a business, it's up and down, and maybe it's up, and then you sell, and then there's no more business. If you're an employed professional, you can lose your job, you can be miserable, you want to quit, and then you're starting from scratch, right? You're starting from scratch. You're knocking on new doors, you're starting from scratch, and if you change in industries or fields, then people are very confused because it's like you're a newbie. It's like there's nothing exists on your resume that's relevant. But when you build recognizability in your name and people know you, not only for what it is that you do, because that's too narrow and that's not ideal for personal brand building, then opportunity remains for you. And that's one of the things that I experienced. When my business crashed and burned during the pandemic, I was able to pivot really quickly and start a new business and still have my community supporting me, and network and clients that started approaching us because people were around for me and knowing me, and not just the work that I was doing at the time. So that is the idea of portability, is that your name is an asset. If you work on it, if you build equity in it, if people know your name, that's an asset that stays with you forever. Business doesn't stay with you forever. Job doesn't stay with you forever, but our name stays with us forever. So we need to build more value in it, because it can serve us throughout our career.
Wow, that's the first time I'm hearing about this term portability when it comes to personal brand. Actually, very very insightful. Actually, so one of my favorite personal brands, or a person, one of my favorite people in the world is Mark Schaefer. I don't know whether you know him. As a marketing influencer, author, best-selling author, etc., etc. So this term can relate to him very closely. He has that kind of an aura he has built in the world of marketing and entrepreneurship and things like that. So your explanation of that just brought him to my mind. So I just thought of sharing that. Cool. So,
and think about it, it's the same for Gary Vaynerchuk, right? He's like selling sneakers and has a marketing agency, etc. And people don't go, well, this is really weird. Why is he doing that? Because there is value, equity, recognizability in his name and what it stands for, and everything else fits under that umbrella. And we can all do that. We can all do that on different scales, different levels, depending on our goals.
Absolutely. I think Gary Vee is on another level itself. He sometimes goes with this baseball cards also. He sells that also. He does all kinds of stuff. So that's a whole another level. All right. So my next question, another area which people get very finicky about when it comes to personal brand is content. There are questions popping up like, do I need to create a lot of content? Do I need to blog, or do I need to make videos, or do a podcast? What should I do? These kind of things. So content is a critical element in building a personal brand, obviously. So what is your advice to leaders to tackle this content dilemma, which is a common question among people who want to build a personal brand?
Very common question, and the biggest problem that people have. What is it? Let's say if I'm going to be posting on LinkedIn, you sit in front of a computer and you're like, okay, so what am I writing about though, right? And that becomes really hard. So again, it's very critical to go through strategy and planning first, because that will answer a lot of questions. Because that's where you ask yourself, okay, what does my brand stand for? What are my goals? Why am I doing this? All those things are really important. And then you also say, okay, well, what is my audience? Or maybe 2 audience segments, right? So that already will dictate your platforms on which you're going to be creating that content. Now, when I say platforms, I'm not just talking about social media platforms, because I think it's very important to note that a lot of people hate social media, and that's okay. And a lot of people build very strong personal brands, and they're not really on social media. Seth Godin, he's a marketing guru, newsletter, books, talks. Social media is like worst practices as far as he's concerned. It's just an RSS feed, and that's okay. There's different platforms. So you want to first decide, what are going to be your platforms depending on your audience? Because, we worked with a client and her audience is teens and preteens, but she really didn't want to do TikTok and she wanted to do LinkedIn. Even if she posts every single day, unless she targets parents, it becomes a little bit irrelevant, right? If you're a professional and you want to build audience and network of potential employers for you, well, certainly LinkedIn sounds like it would make sense, but maybe something offline. You could also create local meetups and be known as somebody who, builds a community and creates a community. There are different ways. Social media is not an answer to everything, although it gives a scale. So first you decide on, who is the audience, what platforms am I going to be on? Then you decide what types of content you are comfortable creating, right? Because I do not believe that we need to be pushing ourselves into something that we really detest just because people are telling us that we should be doing it, right? So if you hate video and you think it's really stupid and you think it's ridiculous, or you think it's really cool when other people do it, but you're like, I'm not going to sit in front of my computer or my phone and talk into a camera and feel weird. You don't have to do it, okay? So it's also for personal branding, you can make those choices. If you like audio, you don't like how you look, but you like how you sound, well, great. Then podcasting is a platform either for your own or to guest on people's podcasts. So depending on your preferences, depending on your audience, you choose the platforms. Then the question becomes, what do I talk about? That's really important. And I have something, again, very practical and very tangible that you can then go and apply. So first of all, your personal brand, that angle that you figure out that's going to be the overarching association with your name, needs to not be connected to what you do. Okay, that's really important because there's no portability in that. If people only know, Vivek the marketer, and then in 3 years from now, you decide that you want to, I don't know, launch your own beverage company,
Right.
that's going to be hard. There's no portability,
Yep.
right? You want to zoom out, there needs to be something else, right? So for example, Gary Vee's hustle. So that's why he's opening other businesses. You're like, right, hustler, you're not surprised. But when you're thinking of what you're going to be talking about, you identify 2 to 4 topics, maximum. 4 is maximum, 2 is minimum. 1 to 2 of those topics are what you do. Okay, so those things that you talk about, that's what builds credibility, that builds associations and attracts opportunity, right? So 1 to 2 topics. If you do one thing, then it's one topic. If you do 2 different things, then it's 2 topics, right? And then you also think of 1 to 2 topics that humanize that credibility, that have nothing to do with any transactional value, have nothing to do with what you do for a living. It could be something you're passionate about. It could be a hobby. It could be philanthropy. It doesn't matter. It all has to fall under the overarching umbrella. Otherwise, it looks like it's all over the place. So 2 to 4 topics, you identify those. And then here's what you do with that. Okay, so you identified your topics. You wrote it out. You have it. Once a month, you sit down and you write yourself a list of questions under each topic. Interview yourself, okay? If you're doing it yourself, write yourself out a list of topics. Do it one day, you did it, done, okay? Then you sit down another day and you create content on that. So it could be videos if that's what you're doing. It could be written content. You figure out what it is. You create just in one shot, that's done. And then you pre-schedule and you post it if we're talking about, content creation specifically for social media platforms. If it's not for social media platforms, you still execute in line with those content pillars, those topics that you identify. And finally, you stay in your lane. Doesn't matter if something of global importance is happening. If it doesn't fall under your positioning, your angle, if it does not align with your content pillars, then you say nothing and you stick in your lane and you stick to your topics. That would be my advice.
Fantastic. I mean, to be honest, this obviously this episode will go as a video on my YouTube channel also. I think the answer to this question alone is worth watching this video. It's such a practical answer, and if you follow that, I believe there's a lot of traction that's going to happen in your personal branding journey for sure. Thank you so much for that fantastic answer, Marina. So, last question related to the topic. Then we move on to a little bit about you and your brand and your stuff. Last question related to the topic. So platforms, you already touched upon it. Platforms or avenues for building the personal brand. It's a big question often asked, when it comes to building a personal brand. So what are your thoughts or advice? You already touched on this, but I want to pick a little bit on this topic. What are your thoughts or advice on choosing the right platform? Or if it is not even important, you can mention that as well for building a personal brand. What are your advice on that?
I think it's very important. I think, look, I do believe in growth. I do believe in pushing ourselves out of our comfort zone. But I know that building that visibility, putting ourselves out there is uncomfortable for most people. And so my advice is contrary to most people's advice. I really believe in choosing what feels most comfortable or the least uncomfortable of all options. I really believe in that. So if you are cringing at the thought of a specific platform, just let it go. It's fine. Find a different one. Platforms, again, range from social media platforms to writing a book, having a personal website and having a newsletter, launching a podcast, guesting on people's podcasts, having local events that you're managing yourself, so meetups, whatever, building an offline community, public speaking. So there are very different options. You write out the list of options. So that's what you do, all of that during that strategy and planning process before you start actually executing on anything. You write out a list and you sit and you think about it. Of course, considering whether there's the right audience there, because it needs to be an intersection of what speaks to you, but also what speaks to people that you want to be knowing your name and having that recognizability. You see what speaks to you, and then start with one. Just start with one. Unless you're looking to build your career as an influencer and then you want to be everywhere and you want to be maximizing everything. That's not most of us, right? Most of us are pursuing specific goals, entrepreneurial goals or employment goals. Choose one and stick to it. Stick to that platform. Don't overthink it a year. Just for a year, do not think whether or not you're doing the right thing. Just don't think about it. And then in the year, sit down and think, was there opportunity that came through it? Any opportunity? was a good opportunity, then another year. And again, you don't think about it. So it's better off to just be focusing on Facebook, or just be focusing on LinkedIn, or just be focusing on podcasting, right? And then just, of course, you like post the links to your stuff on social media platforms, but you don't really focus on creating content there. Just focus on one, do it really well. If you get excited, with time, you can add another one. There's no need to feel that you need to do it all, that you need to spread yourself thin. On LinkedIn alone, if you were posting more than 2 times a week, you were in the 1% most active users, right?
Wow.
So you're already killing it with your consistency. And look, building a personal brand for people to recognize our names, that's huge, and it takes time.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the takeaway here is stick to the lane. Do your stuff, be consistent about it. Cool. Thanks, Marina. Thank you so much. So much of information. I'm going to download the recording and I'm going to hear it to it over the weekend to take notes. Okay, so now, since the topic questions are over, now I want to have some personal questions with you. Like, for example, you have been doing some fantastic work over the years. So I want to hear a little bit about you, your work, and your personal branding agency, which is called Brand of a Leader. How has the journey been so far? You said you had a pivoting moment and your key accomplishments. It's time to hear all about it. So please tell us a little bit about your work and your agency.
So the idea of launching Brand of a Leader came in 2019, but the goal was to launch it 3.5 years later. The reason for that was, so it was December 2019. I had this idea. I was on a retreat. I was in Turks and Caicos, beautiful place, perfect for ideating and dreaming. I was there with a fellow entrepreneur, and I was telling her about my, this dream and, personal branding agency, helping people find their voice, scale the reach of their voice, perfect alignment with my life's mission and my why and my own personal story. Growing up, being born in the Soviet Union, growing up in post-Soviet Ukraine, no voice there. Coming to Canada, nobody understood my English. Again, no voice. To me, the concept of voice is quite priceless and precious. And so I realized I wanted to start a personal branding agency and help people find their voice and scale the reach of their voice. But it was going to be a big pivot. So I wanted to go back to university while running my other business, complete a research program, a master's degree, a research program, study, analyze personal branding, develop my own methodologies and scales and all those different things, and then launch the business once I finish the program. So that was the plan in November, December. We're in Turks and Caicos, and we're sitting there, and my friend, fellow entrepreneur, amazing entrepreneur here in Montreal, also Sana Brock, she owns an interior design studio, and she goes, that sounds great. That's right up your alley. That's an awesome idea. What are you going to call it? And I go, what am I going to call it? Let me think about it. And I go, Brand of a Leader. And she says, that's a cool name. I like it. That's awesome. But the domain is not going to be available. Like, go check. Right. You might have to think of something else. The domain is available, right. 0.99 cents for the first year. She goes, oh my God, this is a moment. Take a picture, buy the domain. I did. Right. But again, the plan was this was going to be 3 years later. But then COVID happened. My other business got punched in the face and the gut, decimated on every angle. And at the time, I was having a lot of conversations with now my co-founder about, should we start sooner? What should we do? And so it's a COVID business that was born in 2020, a lot sooner than we expected. And it scaled exponentially beyond belief as well. We have clients now in North America, Europe, Middle East, Asia, Africa. It's incredible. And we have a team that's globally distributed as well, which is quite fantastic too. So I'm giving you the positive highlights. There are some, of course, a lot of learnings, a lot of, fails along the way. But it has been immensely, incredibly rewarding.
Right. Since, as I mentioned, this show was started during COVID just to spread positivity among people. It is just started as a show where I called one of my friends who's a very positive person I know, an entrepreneur, and we were just having a chat, and I just put it up on Facebook Live. And a lot of people liked it because it was such a dull period. People were going through a lot of trauma. And when people like you come on the show and share their struggles and the beautiful things that came out of it, a lot of people take a lot of inspiration from that. So COVID came with a lot of negativity, but some bit of positivity also it brought in. So that's what we are searching for with the show. That positivity bit which we can latch onto. Thank you so much for sharing your story. So for everybody, just a shout out to your agency. For everybody, every leader out there who is looking for building a personal brand, and obviously, it's a struggle for most of us. For leaders, for employees, for entrepreneurs, everybody. Check out Marina's agency, brandaffiliator.com, and fantastic research, fantastic methodologies, and fantastic services on to avail there. So check it out. I highly recommend it, and speak to their team and see if you need any support when it comes to personal branding. So that's that. Cool. My last question, which is I used to ask a COVID related question to all my guests earlier, but now COVID has become a thing in our life, like a fever or like a pimple. So I've replaced that question, and I thought this season I'm going to ask something that is very close to their heart. So I know, I remember you commenting on that's how I came across Brand Affiliate. First of all, you commented about one of the posts I did for Ukraine. And I know you have a past connected to Ukraine. I know it's your home country, etc. So I want to ask, you can feel free to say no to answer this question, but I want to know, how is your friends and family there? How is the situation? Are they safe, etc., etc.?
It's a heartbreaking situation, and continues to be so. Certainly nobody in Ukraine is safe, because it's just continuous, brutal aggression that is absolutely not stopping. It is absolutely mind-blowing. I mean, as I mentioned, I grew up in post-Soviet Ukraine. I lived there until I was 16, so until I finished high school. To see videos of tanks on the streets that I walked every single day, to see my school that I went to completely destroyed because it was bombed, is absolutely surreal. To see it being done by people who are neighbors, we're completely different countries and completely different mentalities, right? So there are a lot of neighbors that countries have in Europe. Nonetheless, we have a lot of family members in Russia, a lot of friends in Russia, a lot of Russians have a lot of friends and family in Ukraine. So to now see this brutality, and to see that it is not only brutality that comes from the government level, this is brutality that very passionately supported by citizens, by people, by normal, regular people, is heartbreaking. It's absolutely mind-blowing. They will be defeated. Ukraine will prevail. Ukraine will rebuild. And, what's been also done by all of this to shed, to shine light on Ukrainian brand, what it means to be Ukrainian. Of course, on a long-term basis, when we look at it, hundreds of years later, this will be quite meaningful and quite, historical in nature. This has accelerated Ukraine to Ukraine that it's wanted to be for many years. It's accelerated it tremendously, but of course, at the cost, it's absolutely unfathomable.
Absolutely. I'm trying to do my bit most of the time to people who are going through all this. I'm talking to a lot of people on LinkedIn, etc. Trying to share the voice. So it's kind of a very bad situation. People with egos running countries is not good at all. But anyways, I see a post today on LinkedIn which put a smile on my face related to Ukraine. There was one picture of a couple of months ago when there was a bombed building, and that building is already rebuilt, and that gave me such a kind of goosebumps to see that how powerful common people are, right? So it's not about giving up or anything. The strength of common people in Ukraine is commendable, once all this is over, I obviously want to travel to that country to, meet the people who did this, people fighting for their country. It's mind blowing. So Slava.
It's incredible.
Yep, Slava Ukraini. So
Heroyam
I
Slava.
hope
Just to quickly mention, Vivek, the amount of beauty that people have been creating in the middle of absolute chaos and destruction is beautiful. So buildings are being rebuilt, even now, as you mentioned, during the war. People who returned to their houses with fences completely shelled. You might have seen this too, where painting flowers around the bullet holes. It's absolutely beautiful. And one last thing, a lot of people ask, how can I help? What can I do? And I want to mention that help does not only mean monetary help, because I know that at the beginning of the war, in the first few months, so many people donated, and it's just incredible, absolutely incredible. And I'm so grateful for that. And all Ukrainians are, and some people continue to donate. And of course, it's very necessary. And thank you. But writing about Ukraine, sharing about Ukraine, talking about Ukraine as you do, Vivek, is absolutely crucial as well. When I was exchanging messages with my best friend from childhood, who was, in hiding and in basements and all of that, and I was telling her that, everybody's talking about Ukraine, everybody's supporting. This was the first weeks of war. And she said, you have no idea, because I was thinking, maybe she'll think it's stupid. Like, you're posting there from your comfortable homes while we're here, trying not to die. But no, she said, it changes everything, because we know we're not alone. And because we know we're not alone, we know it's all going to be okay. So my request to everyone, same as you are doing, Vivek, and thank you so much for it, is share about Ukraine, talk about Ukraine, post about Ukraine. It's not futile. It's really, really meaningful. And it shows the world that we stand united. It shows an aggressor that we oppose the aggression. And it means a lot. So thank you for what you have been doing.
Everybody's with Ukraine, without doubt, for sure. So thank you so much, Marina, for taking the time out today. And I'm so glad that I kicked off the season with you. And thank you so much. Keep doing the great work. And I will speak to you soon.
Thank you so much. I'm happy this was valuable. And I'm here should you or anyone have any questions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Right. So that was Marina. So, so it was, that's the whole purpose of the show, why I started the show. Interesting people who come on the show and share amazing stories, amazing insights, which we all can, latch on to or learn something or the other. And so today's show, I would love to end it now. And, it was about personal branding. Personal brand is critical for all of us, especially leaders. And every personal brand needs to be built on the right values. You cannot do it for the wrong reasons, right? Leaders with wrong values mess up organizations, countries, and every community. So leaders who have the right values, if they utilize that to build a personal brand, that's a win-win situation. So I highly recommend you to work on your why, find your why, and find your values, and start building your personal brand around it. Thank you so much for joining me today. This is the Thrifty Marketer Talks. I'll see you soon with another amazing guest. And take care. See you soon. Bye.